All right, let's talk about how one of the most spectacular military failures in all of history accidentally gave birth to a brand new science. I'm talking about Napoleon's invasion of Egypt, a wild story of incredible victories, absolutely catastrophic defeats, and a legacy that nobody, and I mean least of all Napoleon, could have ever seen coming. So let's set the scene here. It's 1798, and France has really only one major enemy left standing: Great Britain. Now, the logical next step would seem to be, an invasion of England itself. So why on earth did they decide to pivot and send their best general and 55,000 troops to the deserts of Egypt? Well, the answer is this fascinating mix of grand strategy, massive personal ambition, and some seriously shrewd political maneuvering. Napoleon's own words really get to the heart of what was driving him. For Napoleon, this wasn't just about strategy. It felt like destiny. He saw himself as a modern Alexander the Great, and just like those ancient conquerors, he believed that the real glory, the lasting glory, was waiting for him in the East. This was just the first step in his dream of an empire that would stretch all the way to India. So the plan had its official reasons, and then it had its real reasons. Publicly, the whole campaign was pitched as a brilliant way to hit Britain where it hurt, disrupting their trade routes to India, while also, exporting the glorious ideals of the French Revolution. But behind the scenes, there was something else going on. The French government was frankly terrified of the incredibly popular General Bonaparte. So, sending him off to some faraway land, that seemed like the perfect way to keep him from getting any ideas about seizing power back in Paris. So, this massive French fleet set sail, and you know what? At first, everything went perfectly. It was such a flawless execution that it really looked like Napoleon's huge gamble was about to pay off in the most spectacular way possible.
Seriously, the execution was just flawless. Napoleon's entire fleet managed to slip right past the formidable British Admiral Horatio Nelson in the fog. They took the strategic island of Malta with barely a fight. They landed in Egypt, and within just 3 weeks, the French army was marching toward Cairo, ready for a showdown with the Mamluks, the warriors who ruled the region.
And that showdown, the Battle of the Pyramids, was really a clash between two different centuries of warfare. On one side, you had the Mamluks. These were legendary, unbelievably brave horsemen who had dominated this part of the world for ages. But their tactics, these frenzied individual charges, were just no match for Napoleon's modern, disciplined army. He formed his infantry into these massive hollow squares, creating mobile fortresses of bayonets and musket fire that the Mamluk cavalry just could not break.
And the result? It was a shockingly one-sided slaughter. The Mamluk army was completely annihilated. After that victory, Napoleon marched into Cairo as the undisputed conqueror of Egypt. It really seemed like his grand Eastern dream was actually becoming a reality.
But right at that very moment of his greatest triumph, the entire strategic situation was about to be flipped completely upside down. You see, Napoleon had conquered the land, but he'd totally forgotten about the sea.
Just think about it. For 8 days, Napoleon was the master of Egypt. He's sitting in Cairo, planning his next move, probably daydreaming about marching to India, with absolutely no idea that Admiral Nelson, the same British commander he dodged weeks earlier, had finally found his fleet.
At the Battle of the Nile, Nelson didn't just defeat the French fleet, he obliterated it. In a stunning nighttime attack in Albuquerque Bay, almost the entire French Navy was either sunk or captured. Napoleon's own flagship, the huge L'Orient, literally exploded in a fireball that people said could be seen from miles.
In just a single night, the lifeline back to France was gone. Poof! Napoleon and his 38,000 soldiers were now basically prisoners in the very land they had just conquered, completely cut off by the British Navy. The grand expedition had just turned into a desperate struggle for survival. And now that they were trapped, all that high-minded talk about a civilizing mission just evaporated. The French occupation of Egypt became a grim, bloody, and totally desperate affair. The reality on the ground was just horrific. The Egyptians didn't see the French as liberators. They saw them as foreign invaders. A major revolt broke out in Cairo and was crushed with merciless brutality. Then disease, especially the plague, started to tear through the army. And just to make things worse, the Ottoman Sultan declared a holy war. Napoleon knew he had to do something, so he decided the best defense was a good offense and launched a preemptive invasion of Syria. And it's during that campaign that things took their darkest turn. At the city of Jaffa, the French captured thousands of Ottoman prisoners.
But Napoleon was faced with this cold, brutal calculation. He had no food to spare for them. He didn't have enough men to guard them. And he argued that a lot of them had already broken a promise not to fight him again. His solution was to order a mass execution. For 3 days, the prisoners were marched to the beach and systematically killed.
And in what felt like some kind of grim biblical justice, just days later, the plague erupted with full force among the French soldiers. It completely crippled his army as they tried to take their next objective, the fortress city of Acre.
The siege of Acre, which was being helped by the British Navy, turned into a total disaster. This was Napoleon's first major personal defeat, and it completely shattered his ambitions for an Eastern empire. Forced to retreat all the way back to Egypt, he got some news from Europe that would change everything. A new coalition had formed against France, and the Republic was in danger.
So Napoleon made a decision that was both pragmatic and, let's be honest, deeply cynical. He abandoned his army. He slipped away on a small ship and just left his men behind under the command of General Kleber. Kleber was furious, writing that Napoleon had left them with his breeches full of shit. That abandoned army would eventually surrender to the British 2 years later.
And this brings us to the central paradox of this whole expedition. As a military venture, it was a complete and utter failure. But here's the thing. Napoleon hadn't just brought soldiers to Egypt. He had also brought along 167 scientists, artists, and scholars. And their work would end up having an impact far greater than any battle, starting with a weird slab of stone they found near a town called Rosetta. That stone, which we now call the Rosetta Stone, had the exact same text written on it in 3 different languages, including ancient Greek and Egyptian hieroglyphics. It became the key, the one thing they needed to finally decipher a language that had been lost for over 1,000 years. The work of Napoleon's scholars literally gave birth to the entire field of Egyptology, unlocking the secrets of the pharaohs for the modern world.
Which really leaves us with a fascinating question, doesn't it? The Egyptian campaign was a military catastrophe. It was marked by immense suffering and just unbelievable brutality. And yet, completely by accident, it opened a door to an ancient past that had been sealed shut for centuries. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the most profound legacies in history don't come from our grandest plans, but from our most spectacular failures.